Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, May 7th, 2019 business meeting of the Olympia City Council. For the record, we have a quorum with council member partially excused. I need a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We have an agenda which takes us right to special recognition this evening, items 2A and 2B. The first is recognition and proclaiming that May is Bicycle Commuter Month. And I'd like to invite Michelle Swanson, who is Associate Planner at the City, to explain what that means and how many years have we been doing this.
Thank you, Mayor Selby and City Council. For the record, I am Michelle Swanson, Associate Planner in Public Works Transportation, and this evening I am here with Duncan Green. He is the Thurston County Bicycle Commuter Challenge Coordinator with Intercity Transit. Duncan will receive the proclamation and he will have a few remarks to share as well. I am delighted to introduce this proclamation declaring May as Bicycle Commuter Month in the City of Olympia, which is in support of the 32nd Annual Thurston County Bicycle Commuter Challenge, or BCC, as we like to call it. Each year, city employees from nearly every department, as well as many of their family members, join the city's team to participate in the BCC. In fact, some have even won a grand prize in previous years, and the city's team always makes a respectable showing in the challenge. In fact, I do believe the city's team is a little bit ahead of Intercity Transit's team as of this morning. Just saying. Clearly, city government has a big influence on the success of bicycling in our community. A few things that we've done and continue to do to support bicycling in Olympia include building bike lanes, bike corridors, and neighborhood pathways. In fact, just a few months ago, we finished the Ensign Pathway, which connects the end of Ensign Road in the northeast of the city to the Chehalis Western Trail, which is part of our regional trails network. We also have requirements in our development code for bike parking in new construction. We offer free bike helmets here at City Hall, and that comes with a fitting as well to make sure that the helmet fits on your head. We install bike racks for downtown businesses upon request. 32 years is a long time, and our community support of the BCC over the last 3 decades shows the deep and long-term commitment that our citizens have to bicycling as a form of transportation. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'd like to invite Councilmember Gilman to read the proclamation for us.
Right. Proclamation proclaiming May as Bicycle Commuter Month. Whereas transportation accounts for about 1/3 of the energy use in Thurston County and about half of CO2 emissions from fossil fuel, and whereas the city has a goal to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and whereas bicycling is one of the cleanest and most energy-efficient forms of transportation, short of using your own 2 feet, I suppose. Whereas bicycling is a mode of transportation well-suited to small cities like Olympia, where many of our trips are short, and whereas bicycle commuting can help reduce congestion and offset costly transportation system expansion. And whereas bicycle commuting makes people healthier, more productive, and reduces chronic diseases through physical activity. And whereas the City of Olympia has an extensive bicycle network, which includes a bike corridor, 32 miles of bicycle lanes, and 10 miles of the regional trail system within city limits. And whereas the City of Olympia continues to expand the bicycle network, and whereas Intercity Transit, with many other sponsors, including the Capital Bicycling Club and 44 local and regional businesses, is hosting the 32nd Annual Bicycle Commuter Challenge during the month of May 2019. And now, therefore, let it be resolved that in recognition of the 49th Earth Day and the 62nd National Bike Month, the Olympia City Council hereby proclaims the month of May 2019 as Bicycle Commuter Month in the City of Olympia and encourages all citizens to ride their bikes to work, school, and on their errands during the month of May and throughout the year. Signed in the City of Olympia, Washington, this 7th day of May 2019, Mayor Cheryl Selby for the Olympia City Council.
what with the proclamation and Michelle's introduction, it's almost all been said, but just for the record, I'm Duncan Green. I coordinate the Bicycle Commuter Challenge for Intercity Transit, and I'm mostly just here to say thanks to you, Mayor Selby and Council, for proclaiming May as Bicycle Commuter Month. May is also National Bike Month, and there are activities happening all over the country this May to celebrate and promote bicycling as a means of transportation, including our local edition of Bike to Work Day, which I think that's one thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, but Bike to Work Day is next Thursday, May 16th, from 7 to 9 a.m. at 7 different locations around Thurston County, mostly in or near the borders of City of Olympia. We'll have donated treats and bike trinkets and maps and lots of information about getting around by bike at all these stations. And so I encourage you all to ride your bikes to work on Bike to Work Day. You know, City of Olympia has always made a respectable showing on Bike to Work Day. For 32 years, as has been said a couple times now, the Bicycle Commuter Challenge has been encouraging people to try using their bikes for some of their transportation needs instead of driving. Our website, new and improved every year, makes it easier and more fun than ever to participate. You can just create an account and log your trips at bcc.intercitytransit.com. Also find information there on the location of the bike stations on Bike to Work Day. Anything else you want to know about the Bicycle Commuter Challenge. And I also have a note that friendly and sometimes rather fierce competition between teams in the BCC keeps riders itching to log their miles and days. I have heard about this rivalry between the city and intercity transit, but I don't involve myself in small things like that. So I have to stay above it all. You know? Our sponsorship program, also mentioned, benefits the local economy by involving 46 sponsors, most of which are local businesses, and our sponsors help us reward our participants with coupons, free passes, and prizes for getting involved and going the extra mile. And as Michelle said, our grand prize, which is a bike vacation with Adventure Cycling Association, was won by a City of Olympia employee last year. So we were really excited about that. That was our first year with that prize, and we're doing it again this year. Last year, in the month of May alone, Bicycle Commuter Challenge participants collectively logged about 90,000 miles on nearly 14,000 trips by bicycle, reducing CO2 emissions by an estimated 45 tons just in the month of May, just us biking around Olympia and Thurston County. So it's looking like another great year for the BCC this year. We have uncharacteristically fine weather for the month of May, which is a little scary, but also good for biking. And on just one last note, I'd really like to thank Councilmember Rollins for her rousing cheerleading at our Earth Day Market ride towards the end of April. And really got us all going. Just wanted to say thanks for that. So thanks, everybody, and I'll hope to see you out on the roads on your bikes.
Thank you. Thank you. Any comments from the dais? Thanks, Councilmember Rollins, for being the cheerleader for the bicycle commuter contest, and thanks, Duncan, so much for your support.
Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Yep. And thanks, Michelle. And her bike shirt. Couldn't see it on TV probably, but she's wearing a shirt with bicycles all over it. Perfect. Perfect. So thank you. So we are on to item 2B of special recognition, and that's a proclamation recognizing Olympia Heritage Month and review of nominees for the 2019 Historic Preservation Awards. What I'd like to do first is actually read the proclamation, and then I'll introduce Mary Grace Godou. So whereas Olympia's built heritage is an enduring but fragile treasure deserving of protection, and whereas once lost or destroyed, historic elements that contribute to the character of our community cannot be replaced, and whereas historic value can often be set aside in the face of financial pressures, practical concerns, and misinformation, and whereas Olympia's architecture plays an essential role in shaping our community's character and establishing a sense of place, And whereas owners of historic properties bear considerable responsibility for preservation stewardship for the entire community, deserving of our support and recognition. And whereas the most common and damaging loss to historic homes and buildings is through the replacement of historic windows with short-lived inferior substitutes. And whereas repair and restoration of wood windows is a sustainable and valued craft that contributes to our local economy and strengthens Olympia's sense of place. Whereas the energy efficiency of historic wood windows in good repair can equal or exceed that of replacement windows, especially when paired with storm windows. And now, therefore, be it resolved that the Olympia City Council does hereby proclaim May 2019 as Olympia Heritage Month and urge citizens to participate in activities promoting preservation of historic windows through community workshops, outreach, and education. Signed in the City of Olympia, Washington, the 7th day of May 2019, Olympia City Council, Cheryl Selby, Mayor. So I'll hand this to Mary Grace, and then you can explain more about the program.
Thank you, Mayor Selby and council members. My name is Mary Grace Gaddu, for the record, and I am the Historic Preservation Officer for the City of Olympia. And thanks for the proclamation reading. It kicks off an entire month and then hopefully a year-long focus on wood windows, historic wood windows. We had kind of a kickoff with Arts Walk. We had a public educational display in the windows at the office next to the Olympia Film Society Capitol Theater, and that'll continue through the month. We're going to be doing a wood windows workshop in the month of June, late June, for historic homeowners to learn about maintenance and repair basics. And then we just put in a grant application to do an additional set of workshops next spring. Again, for homeowners, but also looking toward realtors and the construction industry as well, to kind of share the message about wood windows and their intrinsic value, not only to the home and the homeowner, but to the entire community. So that's pretty exciting. Thank you. Kat Kelly is with me today. She's the chair of the Heritage Commission, and we have Heritage commissioners in the office today. In the audience today. Would you raise your hand real quick, guys? There we go. They're here to support your actions and deliberations this evening. So I'm going to talk about our nominations for preservation awards for the month or for the year 2019. City Municipal Code includes powers and duties for the Heritage Commission to recognize excellence in historic preservation. Since 1991, the Heritage Commission has traditionally used the annual Heritage Awards as one way to provide this recognition. This year, the Commission is presenting 4 nominees for council consideration, representing different areas and accomplishments in historic preservation. 2 of our nominees are for specific building projects, and 2 of them are for individual awards in outstanding individual accomplishment. This is the first time ever that we've nominated to recognize a new construction, so it's kind of an interesting new piece for us. And Heritage Commission Chair Catherine Kelly is here to present those nominations to you. And we'll switch, and I'll keep the clicker.
For the record, I'm Catherine Kelly. I'm the Heritage Commission Chair. Mayor Selby and City Council, thank you for the time. This was a spirited discussion, and I really feel proud of the choices that we made. So I'm going to spend some time talking to you a little bit about each one. Then do we pause, or am I going to sail through it? You just go right. Okay. All right. The rapid pace of new development in Olympia led the Commission to recognize this project this year, even though it was completed in 2007. This nomination recognizes TVW, Washington Public Affairs Network, for its excellence in rehabilitation. Credit for the success of this project is shared by TVW's architects, Barnett Shore, Architects of Seattle. The Tumwater Lumber Mills warehouse was constructed in 1934 and transferred to state ownership in 1944. It served as offices for the State Capitol Campus planning and operations, including East Campus development and the Nisqually earthquake response. TVW purchased the building in 2006 and rehabilitated it to house their media operations and offices. The building provides a masterful example of preservation and adaptive reuse of a historic commercial building for a creative educational program. We hope to see more of this in our future downtown creative district, bringing new life to historic buildings with local makers, light industry, and high-tech businesses. This is the new one. This is a nomination of a new building. This nomination is for building owners Chris and Robert Knudsen for their design and construction of Well 80. This new building replaced the Capitol Steam Laundry building, originally constructed in 1920. The new construction honors the design and scale of the original building and the nearby storefronts, but it is thoroughly modern in its detailing. The result is a building that is sensitive to and fits comfortably within the historic streetscape. The owners further chose to honor our artesian wells in naming the establishment and celebrate Olympia's brewing history in their interior design. Significant credit for the success of this new construction project goes to local architects Tovani Hart, Neil Meyer, and Bar Green Ellingson Restaurant Design of Tacoma. Our first individual recognition is for Jackie Wall. Can I ask her to stand? Sure. Okay. Jackie, do you mind standing? Here she is. Jackie Wall? Okay. Jackie is recently retired as Nisqually's Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. She's been a generous guide and educator to all and has shown extraordinary dedication in getting the necessary work done to protect cultural resources, even in cold pouring rain. I'll add an aside that Mary Grace did not write, is that when we were looking for pictures of Jackie in the field, in every single one of them it was raining or snowing. Maybe she can speak to that later. Jackie has been amazing to work with personally and for the city. She is always kind, she's positive and welcoming, and her contributions have been innumerable. Another near and dear one. Is Michelle here? Is she in the field? She's not. Okay. Our second nomination for individual recognition is for Michelle Sadlier. Michelle is our former City of Olympia Historic Preservation Officer, and we are proud to offer this nomination for her work well beyond that role and for her continued excellence in the field of preservation. Among her many accomplishments, we particularly want to note that Michelle has been a consistent and continuing champion for mid-century architecture. She coordinated a 2017 Capital City Modern Tour that brought preservationists from the entire Pacific Northwest to Olympia to appreciate our city's mid-century treasures. She's been a frequent volunteer and advocate for preservation within the context of community planning in Olympia and elsewhere. She consistently demonstrates progressive leadership. A hallmark of Michelle's work and her passion is her attention to the multicultural roots of local history in all its forms, bringing color, life, and genuine connection to our past.
A little ironic. Where's the one with us for Michelle? Oh. It's my brother.
Go
okay.
back. That's Jackie's brother. That's terrific.
Very good. So, there we go. So if you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
All right. Let's field any questions. Councilmember Gilman?
I am so pleased for us to receive these nominations tonight. And I have to ask, do you know any more about the accordion orchestra marching through downtown?
Then,
Got to come to the mic for this. You got to come to the mic for this.
Ben, can you? All right, so it's
Or I
hard.
can read from the Washington State Archive post yesterday about it.
Wow, what a treat.
So, 69 years ago yesterday, Olympia celebrated their centennial with a parade. Sorry, guys.
That's all right.
Parade, 75,000 people came to Olympia. Population in 1950 was 15,000. And yes, that was a giant accordion band that paraded through town. So, 69 years ago yesterday.
Excellent. Thanks for that context. No, it's entertaining. All right. Anyone else have any questions? So, all right. Look forward to hearing more as we go through and hear more about some public commenters are here talking about Design Month too. Relates a lot to what we just heard. All right. So that finishes up special recognition, and now it's our public comment period. So during this portion of the evening, citizens can address the City Council regarding items related to city business, including items on tonight's agenda. We don't have a whole lot of people signed up, and most of them are very familiar with public comment. So I will just add that there's a 3-minute countdown clock over my right shoulder, and that individual comments, don't need to talk about that one. As well, if you did sign up, that I'm going to assume that you understand that we cannot speak about things that we've had a public hearing on in the last 45 days or in the upcoming 45 days, and tonight there's a public hearing. So if you signed up on the wrong list, we can redirect you, and there'll be a public hearing later on in tonight's agenda. So with that, I'd like to invite forward Isaac Wagnix, followed by Jimmy Leon Reeves.
All right, thank you all. So my name is Isaac Wagnitz. I'm an Olympia resident of about 20 years, and I'm here today because it just recently came to my attention that the city is considering establishing a tenant relocation fund to help folks dealing with eviction. And I just wanted to speak in the strongest possible terms in favor of that. I think that as housing insecurity becomes more of an acute crisis in our region and around the country, this is something we really need to address. And this is given particular urgency, I think, really by something else I just recently learned about, which was the Angeles Apartments, where a new landlord has bought the building and was, at least to my knowledge, was threatening to evict a large number of people on minimal notice, 20 days. Now, I've heard that there's some mitigation going on with that, that the city wants to help those folks, and I really hope that the city government does that. I've heard also that the landlord wants to assist with that. I'm a little more doubtful of that. I find it difficult to believe that people like that would suddenly grow a heart, frankly. But I think that this also really points to the need that we have here for a stronger suite of tenant protections, not just relocation assistance, but we need to have rent control, which is a state issue, but we also need to have social housing that's guaranteed. I've come to a lot of meetings and had a lot of conversations, and I've heard a lot of dubious and, frankly, I think even outright reactionary explanations for what's behind the housing and homelessness crisis. And I think we have to be honest with ourselves that what that's really about is the commodification of housing and healthcare, basic human needs that we all share being treated as things that capitalists want to squeeze maximum profit out of. And as we saw with, things like the Tiki Apartments in Tacoma last year, and then, here with the Angeles, it's like people like that don't have qualms about, doing this to ordinary, regular working people. And so we need to not only help those people who are suffering from this right now, we need to enact more measures to make sure that this doesn't happen again. We need to help these people fight back, but we need to make sure that housing is a right for people, because otherwise this crisis is not going to go away. Thank you.
Thank you. Jimmy Leon Reeves, followed by Lizzie Karp. Moses? You.
Yes, my name is Jim Reeves, and also known as Moses. Moses wasn't my birth name, but I adopted the name because I had things in common with his events in his life also occurred in my life. Yeah, for example, Moses used to stand on a hill before the armies of Israel, and when he raised his hands, they'd prevail in combat. But when he dropped his arms or his hands down, they began to lose in combat. So I had that experience in my life. When I was in the U.S. Navy, joined in 1964 early, and went to Vietnam, and we seemed to be doing all right there in Vietnam for the fighting. And then, but after 4-year enlistment, I refused to ship over, so I got out of the Navy in, say, early 1968. And right away, it seemed that the war started going against Allied American forces there in Vietnam. They had the start of the Tet Offensive. And then a year or so later, after I was off my ship was hit by an aircraft carrier, broke in half and sank. 74 sailors died. And then time goes on by from 1969, 1970, 72. But I think it was by 1975, we were out of Vietnam. Some people say we lost that war. So they just didn't have me staying in the Navy. We probably won if I'd stayed in. But anyway, it was like Moses, raising his hands, we're winning, and he lowers his hands, we lose. So anyway, they say a big earthquake's coming. I believe that. I get my information out of the Judeo-Christian Bible, Book of Revelation. Talked about a big earthquake and a big mountain volcano burning with fire. I think that's Mount Rainier. So what should we do about it? The Russians are even in on the program, the theme of a big earthquake in the west coast of the United States this year. They say it's going to be a continent-ripping earthquake. At any rate, I think what we should do about it is vacate the state. Get off the west coast of the United States for your safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Lizzie Karp, followed by Janae Huber.
Hi. I was really glad to hear that you are thinking about a tenant relocation assistance fund. That's very cool. So, because I don't have to ask you about that, which is what I was originally planning to talk about, I'll just say some things that you've probably thought of before. Just cause for eviction. That would be cool. An office of the tenant advocate. And just consider, what if we had a landlord that wasn't able to evict people wantonly and jack up rents for profit, but instead any money they made went back into providing more affordable housing, and they were accountable to democracy. That landlord would be you, the city, or maybe the housing authority. We need social housing. I think that's at the root of a lot of what we're seeing here with the housing crisis, costs rising. So I urge you to consider what you can do to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Janae Huber.
Good evening, Mayor Selby and members of council. Thanks for having me here tonight. I'm here with my colleague, Jamie Heinricher, and together with a group of volunteers, we're organizing something called Olympia Design Month. And I want to share briefly with you a little bit about that series of events. So it's being organized by a group called Olympians for People-Oriented Places, also known as OPOP. And we're inviting you and members of our community to join us for the series of events that we have planned. It's a month-long exploration and celebration of design in this community. Events kicked off last Friday night at the Historic Capitol Theater. There's a lot of overlay with Bike Commuter Contest Month, actually, and also Historic Preservation Month. So we watched a screening of the film Urbanized. And over the weekend, there were also 2 affiliated events. One was the Northwest Green Home Tour, and the other actually was a city staff-led tour of one of our really special public places, Percival Landing. And just for me personally, it was really great to see photos of Percival Landing in the 70s and have a comparison to what kind of public space it is now and how different it is. All of the Olympia Design Month events are free and open to the public, and all of them are hosted in downtown Olympia very deliberately. At each, we're going to look to the ways that design enlivens our community, enhances its unique qualities, and makes Olympia a more people-oriented place. And throughout the month, I hope you'll take a look for our downtown gallery of architecture. We've placed really beautiful posters in over 100 buildings downtown to highlight their architecture and the architectural heritage of Olympia. We've also produced this booklet with a self-guided walking tour that has a couple dozen of those, and I'll leave some for you with city staff. It'll be also available at all of our events. So very briefly, I just want to give a quick listing of what those events are in case people that are watching are interested. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., we're hosting a panel discussion called How Buildings Happen at First Christian Church. And our panelists actually include city staff and also low-income housing developers and market-rate housing developers. And we'll also consider the roles of banks and architects in that, in why we see the structures we see in our community. We are also having a couple of events that are directly design related and are really about looking at architecture and how we think of it and how we notice what kind of emotions it elicits in people. And finally, we're hosting a panel at Temple Beth Hatfield that will help us understand the elements of neighborhoods that make you want to walk, spend time outdoors, bike, or connect with neighbors. How do we get those kind of neighborhoods in Olympia? A final event is called Envisioning Architecture, and we're going to hear from 4 of Olympia's architects about the things that inspire them. So if people want to find out more, they can at olympiadesignmonth.com, and that lists all of the events and their dates and times. So thank you.
Thank you. Any council response to public comment tonight? Councilmember Bateman, or Mayor Pro Tem Bateman.
Thank you. Thank you, Janae, for the update on Design Month. I was able to attend that screening of Urbanized, yeah. I was close last week, and it was really well attended, and it was really inspiring to see people-centered growth of communities, which I think sometimes can get lost when we talk about, especially up here, zoning, land use, all the different policies that we place, one on top of the other. But when we're really designing cities, we want people to be living in them. And they really highlighted how that can be done well and how that can be done with some needed improvements. And they also talked about social housing. There was a community in South America, and I hadn't heard that term a lot applied here. So it was really great to hear it and actually see they actually partnered with the folks that they wanted to house and helped empower them to be a part of the creation of the housing and what it looked like, and gave them options on the inside of the housing. For instance, they had a limited budget, so they said, would you like a water heater for your bathtub, or would you like or for your water, or a bathtub? And most policy and policymakers would say water heater, like that's a better investment. But the people themselves, having been living outside, for them, the privacy of being able to have a bathtub was more important. They were used to having cold water. So they 90% of the time said, we actually want to have the bathtub. And they could, over time, they could invest in a water heater if they wanted to, which I thought was really great, because that's another thing that it's hard for us to do, to involve that people that are actually benefiting from the start. I think from some of the tax structures that they have are different, some of the planning structures that they have are different, which facilitates that. And so sometimes, especially, we're so caught up in the moment of trying to plan for an emergency or respond to an emergency that we haven't done a lot of that, which was really inspiring to see and a really good example. And also, thank you for being concerned with your fellow community members that are being displaced from their landlord currently. I'm really glad that we're going to be addressing this issue later at our council meeting, and that our staff have come forward with a proposal to help offset some of those costs. I think that we can be doing more of that, and I also think we do need social housing here. We have the Housing Authority of Thurston County, which I know has a role to play in public or social housing, and I think that they can be doing more of that. And I know that there's a group that's been organizing around that issue to help get some advocacy going. We also need stronger tenant protections. The state just passed some more aggressive tenant protections, but I know that there's also a conversation with the 3 cities, the largest cities in Thurston County, and some of my colleagues could speak to the efforts on that. But we definitely need to be thinking about individuals, giving them more time and additional resources. And also, we don't have a tenants union in Thurston County and an option for people. So there's a lot of conversations that are happening around all those issues. So just wanted to plug that and let you know that we have a really great community where you're not the only ones that have communicated with us about this issue of these folks that are being displaced. So we have a really compassionate and caring community that don't want to see people being displaced. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I'll just pick up where Mayor Pro Tem Bateman left off around tenant protections. I mentioned a few weeks ago that the ad hoc committee on housing and homelessness had a chance to hear about all of the work that Tumwater has done. around tenant protections, and I know there's some implications from the legislative session on that work. But I wanted to see if we can get a study session scheduled for the council to review that full body of work, or maybe that's already in the works.
No, I thought it was going to go through land use. Okay.
Oh, I apologize. I didn't realize that. So,
Yeah, I thought I saw that on a future land use.
so then I guess my
agenda.
question should be, what's the timeline roughly for that? Realizing everything's fluid. Okay, cool.
Yeah, we can get back to you. I know it's on here on a future calendar, but I'm assuming after that it'll come to us for a study session or other business for us to, sorry, Councilmember Jones.
Thank you. We received a presentation at our last land use meeting on those tenant protections, and our discussion at that time was to reschedule a number of our agenda items as we look out over the year. And so at our next meeting, we'll be talking about our calendar. So it actually is undetermined right now. We're setting aside some things that are not related to housing and prioritizing some housing issues.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Great. I think it would be, if appropriate in your agenda, a great opportunity to bring the whole council together to look at that whole picture before you guys change it much. Thank you.
Yep. And to follow up on that, I think that that would be a great topic for Housing Summit 3. Just talk about tenant. Oh, yeah, well, there you go. Great minds. So, yeah, we're definitely thinking a lot about this situation because it's not uncommon. And, you get, unfortunately, some of the units that are in the inventory are in desperate need of restoration. They're not even safe for some people to be in. And so it's like balancing that need of somebody that needs that lower rent, but the housing is not safe for them. And so it's like balancing, how do you balance that? It's hard because you want people to be in safe housing and clean and not have to worry about fires. And but how do you keep somebody in their unit while you're restoring it? So it's an ongoing conundrum. So I'm really excited that we're going to be talking about tenant assistance relocation fund later on. Anything else? Councilmember Rollins.
Just real quick, I appreciate the discussion about doing work and exploring what we can do as a city to help get to the root of the housing problem, because it is often that we're in react mode. When I agree that it's the fact that housing is for profit instead of nonprofit or public and otherwise accountable. I think we get around a lot of the problems that Mayor Selby identified, where sometimes housing that's affordable is not very decent or safe. And so, believe we can have all of the above, and I appreciate that discussion. I also think, Janae, I wanted to thank you for coming out and for the work that you all have done for Design Month. And I thought it was kind of a related topic, the panel you mentioned about how buildings happen, because I expect that it will be some of what I've learned over the last couple of years about what is the process, where do the costs come in, and so that would, I assume, would be a great primer for kind of how things are, why things are the way they are now, and then there's other people working on how to make things and pencil out differently in the future. So thank you everybody for speaking.
Great. And I wanted to close as well to thank your team of two. I'm sure there's other people helping you, but definitely thank you to Jamie Heinricher and Janae Huber for pulling off the first ever Olympia Design Month. And like she said, you can find out more about what they're offering at olympiadesignmonth.com. And I look forward to seeing this event grow. With that, we are finished with public comment, and that takes us to our consent calendar. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Any questions, comments, or polls? Anybody?
Can I just a comment on 4C?
4C? All right. Anybody else? All right, let's take that comment now.
Okay, just this will take a little bit off of my report at the end of the meeting. This is a comment about the mid-year retreat we have coming up, which general government discussed at our last meeting, and I just wanted to thank Kelly as well as Susan for the work helping put that together. Susan in particular did research to find a de-escalation trainer, and so we can look forward to that this coming June 8th.
Wonderful. Thanks for that. All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent calendar is adopted, which takes us to our public hearing this evening, and I would like to get my notebook on the right page and introduce Keith Staley, our fearless Director of Community Planning and Development, to talk to us about this ordinance that we'll be considering declaring a continuing state of a public health emergency related to homelessness.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. I'm Keith Staley, Community Planning and Development Director. I have a very short presentation for you this evening. We can move quickly into the public hearing. Staff has done some work in continuing to evaluate the need for a public emergency in regards to homelessness in our community. We think that such an emergency situation continues to exist. We think that there's plenty of evidence for that. The ordinance in front of you this evening has 19 whereas clauses. I will not read each and every one of them, but to paraphrase, conditions necessitating a public health emergency continue to exist in the city, including widespread unsanctioned camping, threats of communicable diseases from unsanitary conditions, environmental degradation from human waste and garbage, illegal drug use, and improper use of public and private property throughout our community. Those conditions continue to exist. We certainly have made progress over the course of the last year, but we think that we're going to continue to need to have an emergency situation and an emergency declaration in place going forward for at least the next 6 months. We will be back in front of you sometime between now and December 21st to evaluate whether or not further continuance is necessary. Happy to answer any questions. Mr. Barber can as well. Just one other note in regards to the ordinance, it does authorize the mayor to send a letter to the county commission. Item E says the mayor is authorized to submit a written request to the Board of County Commissioners of Thurston County and Governor Jay Inslee to make available county and state lands, buildings, and other resources to address the public health emergency, because we recognize that this is a regional and statewide problem, and we need regional and statewide resources to help respond. So thank you.
Absolutely. And can I add to that Councilmember Jones and I were up on the Hill, the county courthouse hill today, testifying in support of their emergency camping amended. I just lost the word. Just their emergency camping ordinance to have it mirror like what we have created, so that they could help us potentially with mitigation site at a lower level of requirements and with greater speed. Excellent. And as well, I will be meeting with the mayors from Lacey and Tumwater and County Commissioner Hutchings and potentially our LD22 representatives with the governor later this month to present this same idea. So
thank you. We
need the help. All right. Any questions for Keith? All right. So with that, I will now formally open the public hearing. Yes, we did have somebody sign up. So, so the public hearing is now open. It has the same rules as public comment in that you have 3 minutes. There'll be a countdown clock over my right shoulder. I have one person signed up, but I will open it up to the floor if there's more. I'd like to call forward Arthur West.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Arthur West, and I'd like to first thank you for your attempts to try to make things better. It's not always that it's possible to make a change. I see that the city's actually attempting to do something good. The problem I see amongst all the cities that I go and visit is cities don't have a lot of authority or resources to deal with this problem. There's been declarations of emergency for 3 years in Seattle and Tacoma, and I don't think cities alone are capable of dealing with this problem. And what we've got is a permanent state of emergency with every little petty jurisdiction trying to address it with inadequate resources. So I very much support your attempts to get the governor to try to dedicate some resources to this. You're working with Thurston County. This is a regional problem. It needs a regional solution. And it's not like we're not already spending the money. Keeping people out on the streets costs more than housing them does in all sorts of different collateral things. So I would hope that you would seriously try to contact our governor, who does have emergency powers. And I do have a handout today because part of the stuff that I've been doing is trying to figure out why there's been a public emergency for over 3 years and our governor hasn't used their emergency powers to access, to address this. I've got a handout to you that shows some of the advice that the governor's received. Unfortunately, they're not really too much up to sharing it. In fact, the first page here was actively concealed and destroyed by the governor's office and had to be recovered from another office. So our governor's office is not being forthcoming with what powers they have, and I hope that when you ask them for the necessary resources to address this regional problem, they don't give you a runaround like they've given me when I've tried to find out why they haven't done a damn thing in three years of this emergency. And it gets down to the question of, as Stalin observed, when someone said the Pope was upset, his question was, how many tanks does the Pope have? So that would be my position on City of Seattle, City of Tacoma, City of Olympia councils having a problem with homelessness. How many tanks do you have? How much resources do you have to actually do something to end this problem? The answer is cities, as it's been going in the state of Washington, do not have adequate resources. We need the state to step up and provide a regional solution so that there's housing for people who need housing, there's treatment for people who need treatment, and that the citizens who actually carry the system on their backs and pay the taxes don't have to deal with homeless people in their backyards. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in chambers that would like to speak to the consideration of an ordinance declaring a continuing state of a public health emergency related to homelessness? Is there anyone else? All right, I'll close the hearing. Is there any further discussion this evening on the dais? I'll entertain a motion.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I have a motion.
All right.
I move to approve the ordinance declaring a continuing state of public health emergency relating to human health and environmental conditions caused by increasing homelessness in our community on first and final reading.
Second.
All right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Next to item 6A, which is the launch of our 2019 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan and Public Process. And our queen of all things CDBG, Anna Schlecht, whose official title is Community Services Programs Manager. So this is our annual run around the calendar with CDBG. And so explain to us what process we're undergoing tonight.
Thank you, Mayor Selby and Olympia Council members. Tonight, we had originally planned to come to you to launch the public process for the coming program year of Community Development Block Grant, which is providing was originally dedicating about half of its funding to be part of our homeless response. Since then, we learned of the Angeles Hotel selling, and we are, at the same time we're going to be looking at the annual action plan, are going to ask that you run a concurrent public process on a proposed tenant assistance program for those tenants. So tonight, we're asking the council to launch a 30-day public comment period for both the next program year and an amendment of this year. The citizen participation process is required by the federal government, and it's just good government to consult with your community when you're spending their tax dollars. It's based on our citizen participation plan, which calls for up to 30 days of public comment, where we post our proposed use of CDBG funding and put out paper copies, directly emailed to CDBG stakeholders, and present what our proposals are in those meetings. Tonight, we're asking that you launch that process and that it run from May 8th to June 8th. During that time, we ask that you hold a public hearing on June 4th, and we're hoping to call for a final decision on, again, both the annual action plan and the proposed amendment of the current year on June 18th. We submit this to HUD on July 15th. Although the amendment, if it's passed, could actually start as soon, well, actually the morning after the 18th. We don't typically start things after 9 o'clock at night, but could begin immediately to start work on the tenant relocation plan if you accept that. And then the program year, the new program year will start September 1. As you recall, we have one of the strangest fiscal years. We start September 1 and we run through August 31st. We start in the 11th month of the federal fiscal year. We're not aligned with any other program year, and it's one of the many ways we're special. All of our CDBG activity is based on the 5-year strategic plan that you approved for last year. It's a 5-year plan that runs from 2018 through the year 2022. It identifies your strategies and priorities. It looks at Olympia-based needs, responds to current events, and tries to be flexible, as we were talking about this evening. And the most important thing is that it can be amended. It takes time, it takes consultation with the public, but it can be amended. Those strategic priorities are the two highest are housing and land acquisition that supports housing, but the other high priority activities are public facilities like community centers, day centers, economic development to support businesses which will create jobs, because jobs and economic opportunity is a big part of facing homelessness and poverty issues. Also includes support for downtown safety loans, the lighting program that we've been working on 3+ years now. Another priority is public facilities of a different stripe, and that is public infrastructure, sewers, water lines, things that help undeveloped or underdeveloped neighborhoods get the infrastructure they need to be higher functioning. And then the last listed priority is social services. So program year 2019's annual action plan will be the second year of this consolidated planning process. And the photo you see there gives an image for one of the proposals this year, an additional $125,000 to go to the Salvation Army's Day Center project. Yes, this is familiar because in the current year we have allocated $300,000. I'm very happy to report that the Salvation Army is listening to community needs. They first told us about a year ago that they would create a day center and that they would commit to working on doing a better job of cultural diversity and recognizing in particular the unique needs of transgender, homeless, houseless people and employees. They are consulting. I'm really happy to hear that they're consulting with partners in prevention, PIP, help, education. There's that word. They're also going to be the first shelter that's intentionally installing gender-neutral toilet and shower stalls. And as their project has grown, their funding needs have grown. They've also, during the past 12 months, decided to remodel their existing shelter in the lodge building. They also decided to relocate their admin offices and totally gut remodel that facility. Their goal is to be able to accommodate up to 170 people. So they're all in. They do need additional funding. They've got some funding gaps. And I can answer more questions about Salvation Army a bit later. Our anticipated funding this coming year is an estimated $450,000. As you know, we have to look to the future to guesstimate what our program income is. CDBG program income is generated by prior year loans that we made on housing projects. As they come back to us, sometimes in big chunks, and we'll talk about that in a moment, we can use those and reallocate those. So we've been notified by HUD that we will receive $368,906 in new CDBG. We're estimating $81,094 in program income, rounding up to $450,000. We would prefer to under-promise and over-deliver as opposed to overestimate program income. So that's why we're sticking with that amount. This photo gives an image of another one of the proposals, and that is for $80,000 to invest in the basement occupancy of Interfaith Works Shelter, an amazing program in downtown Olympia that is hosted by First Christian Church, run by Interfaith Works, and supported by many volunteers. As many of you probably know, it's an antiquated church. The old sewer system requires a tremendous amount of tender loving care and expensive plumbing bills. So we're proposing to replace a big section of that sewer line, finally to repair the flooring that was damaged during the last sewer flood, which is kind of a nasty situation. It has been noted to me that $80,000 is a lot of money to invest in a shelter that may not be there for more than 2 years, because our hope is that Interfaith Works is going to be relocating their operations to Martin Way, East Martin Way, 2828 Martin Way. The church, however, has indicated that they're still all in being a faith community responder to homeless needs, and they're interested in creating housing in that basement area. So the sewer will live on. I think that's a beautiful thing. So this is the recommended roster of projects. I only had space for a few photos, but we're recommending $125,000 additional to go to the Salvation Army's efforts to accommodate up to 170 people with 24/7 care, which means they will be in shelter, and come 7 a.m. in the morning, they will not be kicked out. There will be a day center for them, an expanded kitchen, and it will be a much more gender-neutral facility, and will be a lot more accommodating to larger numbers of people. We're proposing $80,000 for public facility repairs at First Christian Church basement shelter occupancy. We're recommending that we continue 3 different economic development projects because, again, jobs are a big part of responding to low-income issues and poverty issues. We're recommending another $20,000 for Enterprise for Equity's micro enterprise program, another $30,000 for the Thurston Economic Development Council's small business program, and another $50,000 for the downtown safety lighting loans. And then my trifocals are bad. Here we go. Another $55,000 for the amazing ambassador program, which one of your seatmates is a alumni of. They provide a remarkable amount of direct service, referrals, and community response as part of the city's growing community response teams. And then, of course, we need to keep the approximately 20% or $90,000 to run a very complex program. So this represents about 19% economic development, over half homeless response, and about 20% for the general admin. So that's our proposal for the annual action plan that would start September 1st. Tonight, at the same time, we're asking you to amend our program year 2018, the current program year. April 15th, we learned that the Angeles Hotel was going to sell. The broker on this particular transaction has become a lot more aware of homeless issues and the role of eviction in homelessness, and just the struggle of very low-income people to find housing and stay housed. She let us know about this, and staff immediately flew into action, worked with our city manager, who I think consulted all of you in the past 3 weeks about a one-time startup, if you will, a one-time proposed tenant assistance program to take all of the funds that we would receive in repayment, approximately $56,000, and use all of those funds for tenant assistance for the people who are displaced. I know that earlier commenters were hopeful that we were launching a more broad-based tenant assistance program. This is kind of the first time out for focusing on a project that we're not directly involved in. In years past, when we did major remodels or rehabilitations, I believe it was the Thompson Apartments, which is above Dree's store, we provided tenant relocation to all the occupants of that building because it was a complete gut remodel. But in this case, we're responding to displacement that would be happening in a project that we're not involved in remodeling. So the idea is that we would receive $56,000 and that we would use $56,000 to help these tenants find new housing and provide first and last month's rent and to support them in that transition. And I presume you'll have more questions about that. This amendment would basically change our last program year, which was kind of a banner year, as you remember. We had $1 million to work with, and part of that was we had some past year projects that didn't move forward, and we kind of gathered up unspent amounts from a number of different projects that weren't going to spend it. We had a little over $300,000 from a sunsetted program called the rental rehab program. So all of that came to $1 million. We're proposing that we amend it this current year by adding $56,000 to that. So that would make our current program year $1,056,000. So it's my favorite graphic of all. We call it the oil spill, but with all due respect, in the nicest possible way. But this shows that we're basically always in the circle of the CDBG program. The yellow box shows that we're coming to you tonight asking that you launch a public process for the annual action plan. And I think my computer cut off that we're also asking that you launch an amendment process at the same time. It would start and go tomorrow, go for 30 days. In the midst of that, we would have our public hearing, and then we would come back to you for final action June 18th. And that's a recap of the days one more time. And I will just close by saying we are hoping to launch the public process for the annual action plan, and we staff are hopeful that you will give sincere consideration to our proposed tenant assistance program to assist people at the Angeles Hotel. I can add that I had a conversation with the owners today. One was in the hospital and called me, had the phone while he was having some kind of hospital procedure thing done. And I talked to both of them, and I explained we were very concerned and asked if they could delay displacement, and they agreed absolutely. And I explained that we're working on creating these funds, but they would not be available until the end of June, and they said that's fine. They shared with me that they had already committed to giving each household $750 in relocation funds, and that they were planning on returning all rental deposits to help folks. There were a number of occupants that have health problems, and they're committed to helping those folks. And as best as possible, they're going to try to move people around during the renovation. But their plan is to update this building. They will be investing a considerable amount of money, and their plan is to increase the rents closer to market. It's a loss of very low-cost housing. The rents that they charged haven't been seen in Olympia for probably 15 years. That's how low they were. So that is the situation. They are bringing forward their own cash. They want to work with the city program. I'm probably not going to call the gentleman in the hospital tonight, but I will call him tomorrow morning at about 8:05 and say what your decision is. And it's shared with them that we have to wait until June 18th to confirm that process. So again, hoping that I can entertain any questions about launching the process, the dual process for the action plan and the amendment.
All right, I've got Councilmember Jones.
Great. So first of all, thanks for a nice overview of what's being proposed. Very much appreciate that. I have a couple questions. So the $56,000 is presented here as an addition. So is that program income, or where are those dollars coming from?
That's program income that's above and beyond what we estimated. We've already received what we're estimating for program income. This is kind of like, a big chunk on top of that.
So there'll be no reduction in other areas in order
there
to
will
make that
not
happen. So my other question is more of an overview. So about $369,000 of federal CDBG funds coming in projected for the next year. Could you just tell us the last 5 years or so, what is the trend line on federal funding for this program?
We've held somewhat steady for a couple years. We're down like 2,000 from last year. The year before, I think we were at 329,000. I'm not sure if you're referring to this, but I know that with the current presidential administration, there was talks of completely eliminating the CDBG program and the home program. That has not come to pass. There are something like Keith Staley tells me that there are probably 3,000 city managers and county managers across the country that would storm Washington, D.C. because this is a critically needed local funding tool.
Yeah.
You would join them going to D.C.?
We'd all march on Washington.
I guess my comment is that what I've seen by the use of CDBG generally and in Olympia is that it's an amazing tool to leverage other funds, and because of its flexibility, it does things that other dollars simply can't do. So I believe it's a really important program. And I don't want to cut off any dialogue or discussion, but I'd like to make a motion.
There might be some.
Can I just put a motion on the floor?
Sure.
Sure, okay. To launch the 2019 Community Development Block Grant Annual Action Plan and Public Process, and amend the current 2018 CDBG Annual Action Plan to support the tenants of the Angeles Hotel.
Second.
All right, some discussion. I got Councilmember Gilman.
I just wanted to clarify my understanding that this $56,000 for the amendment that we're considering is the repayment by the current owner of the Angeles building to our fund as the property is sold, right?
It's
So
the
just
proceeds from the proceeds of the sale.
Right.
It's the balance of our, I'm sorry, I didn't explain that. The Community Development Block Grant Program invested $75,000 in this building for an emergency fire sprinkler. The building is in rough shape, very, very rough shape. And it was identified as the most serious fire risk by our fire marshal, Rob Bradley, who we all miss. We love our current fire marshal. So we went in there, installed the fire sprinkler system. They paid down. The current balance is about $56,000. They had to pay us when the building sold.
Thank you, Anna. And then I just want to say that I'm in support of the proposals, and I really appreciate that we kept a balance of some of the local economic development efforts as well as the housing efforts. Those are important for us to keep going too. So,
Thank you for that. Councilmember Bateman, followed by Councilmember Rollins.
Thank you. I support the motion and the amendment and appreciate staff's proactive work to help provide a little bit of a buffer for these community members. I also, given how long they've been paying rent and the cost of the rent that they've been paying, the challenge for these folks to actually find comparable rent will be extremely difficult. And adding on top of that health concerns, technological issues, I'm just wondering what kind of assistance can be provided for actually, attempting to look or locate rent, available properties. And if we have nonprofits in our community that can help with that, if we can help with that, I feel like it's really great to be able to provide that financial assistance, but I think there might be a little bit more that we could possibly do.
Would you like a response? We have been in dialogue with all of our coordinated entry partners. We have been in dialogue with our county homeless coordinator, Keely Marino. Fortuitously, I have been working with an amazing intern, have to give her a shout out, Monica Mitchell, who has been doing a 2-semester housing inventory compilation, and she has basically charted, I believe it's 8,500 units, which is like 75% of the multifamily units that are in our city. I might have those numbers wrong, but we have the names of the properties, the contact information. She's also doing a rent survey, so we have an idea of what the current rents are. So we will have the tools for referral. Once we get the green light, we will formally negotiate with one of the partners to see if they will take this up and what it would, what they will need for admin to run that. So we've been working the issue.
Thank you. Councilmember Rollins.
Thank you. No questions, but just support the motion and wanted to thank you for your quick work on the Angeles situation, as well as, and I think that project, as well as the Salvation Army part of the 2019 proposal, just really reflects your commitment to relationship building. I think you're a great ambassador, not only for the city organization, but for our community values. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Motion's been.
And can I clarify? You're not amending the current year tonight. You can't do that. You're launching a public process to both amend and do the annual action plan. Just to be very clear.
All right. And then, if I could get clarification, I didn't have this as a motion tonight. There was nothing on the. It's an action item, but sometimes I just normally I have a yeah, it's just more.
I apologize. Should it have said move to launch?
Sure. Yeah, I just didn't have it written down as a formal motion. I usually get that little,
We
you know,
do, yeah.
motion
So
sheet.
our mistake. We did intend a motion. We didn't write it up that way, so our mistake.
Yeah, it reads like that now, but I didn't see it as a motion. So thank you for doing that. And all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion passes. Thank you.
Mayor Selby, can I ask Anna a question about something
Sure.
she brought?
Up. Anna, can't
Anna,
slow walk away.
I just have a quick question because you brought something up that it wasn't pertinent to the motion, but because you have the knowledge, I thought I might ask the question. When we had a request for funding from one of our coordinated entry partners earlier this year, council asked for the coordinated entry system to bring us the scope and scale of what properly funding coordinated entry looked like around July of this year so that we can consider that for our budget. Do you have any sense as to whether that work is happening? Maybe you're the wrong person, I apologize.
I think that they're still working on that. There's been a lot happening on coordinated entry, I believe you're all aware.
So we should get something that gives us a picture before we jump into our budget?
I'm seeing a shrugging of shoulders. I know that people are working on that.
Okay.
I believe.
Also, I can add.
Councilmember Rollins?
I'm not sure if this gets at part of what you're asking about, but they do have the coordinated entry does have a proposal in for the county dollars that the community investment partnership is going to be deciding or making a recommendation on this month. So that's county, but.
Okay. Yeah, so my question may be wrong, poorly placed, but I do believe that we had a condition on the funds that we allocated to sidewalk that we would see that picture by July. And so I just want to make sure that we're going to.
I just didn't know who was on up to bat on taking charge of that.
I can say that the contract is not with Sidewalk, it's with the contract provider, which is Family Support Center. The contract has been executed and they're working on completing out this year. Do you want to come up and add anything more, Keith? He does not.
Sounds like we need a little bit more clarification on who's in charge of bringing that back to us in July, whether it's the
We will find that
county
out
or
and
whether
get you
it's
that
Family
information
Support
soon.
Center.
We'll email you directly.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, that takes us to our council reports. I'll start with a quick mayor report. We just completed with city staff on our homeless response plan 3 public meetings with our community. There was one for the downtown community. There was also one over at Olympia High School 2 weeks ago, and then there was one at Capitol High School this last Saturday. They were all very well attended, and numerous council members were in attendance, and we were able to move from table to table and listen to our community express their concerns, but also their hope in a very safe environment. And I really have to thank Amy Buckler and Stacy Ray for their facilitation of those meetings. It was beyond my expectations. And so I'm just super, super proud of what we're doing, because as we know, we can't stay in crisis mode, or we don't want to stay in crisis mode forever. And so this homeless response plan is going long-term, long-range, big vision about how we can get to functional net zero homelessness. So that's all I have to report. Any questions? All right. Councilmember Gilman.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. I wanted to highlight a couple of issues or thoughts that came up during the Capitol High School workshop that really impressed me. The first was at 2 different tables, I heard children have no control. Whether it's being a kid who leaves, goes out of school, sleeps in a car and panhandles with their mom, or it's a kid who walks through downtown and finds a needle or is scared by somebody. The kid's got no control over that situation, and that, for several community members, was one of the reasons we have a responsibility to actively manage the situation for kids who don't have any control. The second idea that I heard is that, and actually it came from several council people in the response to public comment today also, that we should begin work on a long-term plan to get housing for everybody. That we have efforts in place now to address symptoms, to incentivize development, to provide social services, trying to reach the most vulnerable. So we're doing a good job of being humane to address symptoms, but there were folks who were bringing up the idea of taking a chance to create a more just society and build a plan to house everybody affordably. And that's something we don't We just don't plan right now. So that was a seed that I think is worth carrying forward.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilmember Gilman? Councilmember Jones?
Well, I'll also just report real briefly. Thank you for your report on the Capitol High event. Like the Olympia High School event, what I took away from that more than anything else was members of our community engaging with each other. There was a broad spectrum of perspectives being expressed, and yet people at the table were engaging respectfully with each other and trying to find ways forward, to find common ground as to how our community should respond to this issue for the long term. I also want to report on the most recent Thurston Regional Planning Council meeting, which was held on Friday. Really just 3 presentations very quickly. We had a presentation on the Integrated Emergency Management Training, which one of our council members attended, Councilmember Rollins, and some of the follow-up that will come from that. That training was not just a capsule, but instead actually launches an ongoing process of preparing for emergency. We also looked at the Regional Transportation Plan. This is something that is updated on a regular basis. You start with the goals and objectives, and our determination on Friday was that the goals and objectives actually are fairly static this year, that we've done a good job in identifying those in the past, and we will carry them forward. And then one more look at the Sustainable Thurston Plan 5 years out and our progress on that plan. And the consensus that we found was really we have wrung about as much out of that plan as we can. We've made substantial progress on many of the objectives that were identified there. Some of the activities that were called for actually need to be reworked at this point. And so it's time to take the lessons from that plan and our ability to implement it and actually to look towards a new process rather than reworking the old plan. So thanks very much. That's my report.
All right, any questions for Councilmember Jones? Sounds like we need to bring Kathy McCormick back out of retirement. All right. Mayor Pro Tem Bateman.
Thank you. I also attended the Capitol High School workshop, and I just have to say that we hear a lot of feedback from folks that the 3 minutes at the mic is not the most engaging way for them to communicate with us. We know that's true. These are business meetings. We have a formal process. Dialogue actually isn't allowed. So we have, over the last couple of years, I think last year was the first community conversation that we had, but councils many years before have been asking for different alternatives. And what we saw was at that workshop, and I'm sure at the other ones too, the answer really lies with the people, in giving people an opportunity to engage with each other and go through a process of listening, hearing different ideas, and kind of contrasting and comparing and going through that process with each other. It just restores my faith so much in our community, the compassion that they have. It was overwhelmingly, I mean, people had concerns, but it was overwhelmingly positive. And the kindness and the caring that our community has for other people that experience different life experiences just really, really humbled me and made me feel really, really good. And I wanted to say that because we hear that from folks, that they want an alternative way to dialogue with each other. And I think it helps us get better solutions. And I also want to let staff know that they're really on track to keep up that work. I know that we also had a meeting last week on the proposed potential mountain bike for the parks plan, and that they used a similar format, and they also had really good results. And so please continue to do that work. Unrelated to that, this afternoon, today at 5 p.m., I attended a special PBI meeting in Councilmember Parsley's stead because she was not able to attend. And they got a briefing from the Olympia Downtown Alliance on the possibility of a property investment district. I'm saying that right?
Assessment.
A property assessment district. So we have a business investment assessment.
A parking business investment
Thank you.
area.
And we as a city manage that, which is very unique. There's only one other city that actually does that, which is Vermont, surprisingly. So the Olympia Downtown Alliance is studying the possibility of taxing properties as an alternative, or in addition to, they've hired a consultant whose name is Brad Siegel. He's from Denver, Colorado, and he works with cities all across the country that are investigating the possibility of this. There's benefits. You can have more revenue for potential improvements to downtown. There's also concerns from our small business owners or small business representatives that are on the PBIA about where their voice would be in that process and how they would continue to ensure that their perspective would be represented in any kind of potential changes. It would require 60% of the potential property owners to select that they want to do that. And then the interesting part is, because it's like a property tax, so it's more equitable. So it's, if you have a larger piece of property, you're going to be taxed more. In addition to that, the way that we tax our businesses is a little clunky and difficult to do. With this, there's actually a property to assess, and it's reported every year from the Thurston County Assessor's Office, so there's some benefits to that. It's stable. Property owners are long-term investment. They have properties for a long time. But obviously, this is just an investigation, and it's very preliminary. What I will say is that the dialogue between the two, the PBI members were cautiously optimistic. They had a lot of really good questions. They definitely had questions about what role business owners would have, but it was a pretty good meeting. So they'll be going through a process for the next couple months. They're going to come back with a plan. They wanted the PBIA had more questions that they wanted to have answered, and they were also interested in the governance structure and how they could be involved in that. So just a quick update, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Oh, hands up, everyone. Okay, I saw Councilmember Gilman, followed by Councilmember Jones.
Thanks for that report and for attending the meeting. Was there any mention of a varying rate, like a vacancy tax or a surcharge on not occupied retail space?
Good question. And that question was asked. And so two things. No, for taxing the property owners, they probably wouldn't be taxing individuals that have vacant properties. But there are other ways that cities can choose to tax vacant property owners, which is something I know that we've heard interest in. There's also potential for different zones, so different rates and different levels of service for different areas in downtown.
All right. Yeah.
So if there's more on the district, we should conclude that. I was going to go to the discussion of the Kaiser Heights Bike Park facility that you brought up. I just wanted to thank you for mentioning that. It actually skipped my mind, but I was in attendance at that meeting, and it is the Parks Department's largest public turnout for a facility discussion. Over 200 people in attendance. They met in circles in this room, but they spilled out into the lobby, and when I arrived, they already were spilling out into the street, having discussions about the facility. People ranging from age 10 to age 70 engaged in discussions about the facility. 3 different alternative designs were being discussed. There were people with concerns about the impact on the neighborhood, and the respectful conversations that were going on were impressive. People wanted everyone to succeed. It was really quite impressive. So an excellent turnout and an excellent discussion. So thanks for mentioning it.
All right. Any other questions? I look forward to following the process. I think I said it wrong as well. The parking business improvement area. I might have said investment area too. Anyhow, I think there's a path forward for both of those groups or both those 2 assessment districts to work together in a way that represents everybody. So, all right, Councilmember Rollins.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple items to report. First, on the General Government Committee, we met April 24th, and we had an update on the Economic Development Program at the city, as well as the Downtown Ambassador Program. And just a little point of note, maybe you all know, but I didn't know that there's going to be a medical prosthetics business moving into the former Alpine Experience building, NP Devices. So that's exciting for downtown. As well, the Creative District submission is due June 1st. That's coming up. And then Intercity Transit Board met on May 1st. We first we approved the concept for public art that'll be going up at the new Olympia Transit Center building, and I think you'll really like it. It's called River Migration, and it's based on the erosion patterns over time from the Hoh and Quinault rivers. So it's really beautiful. It's like a metal with perforations of different size, so you get the different texture kind of the river erosions, and it's to complement the rainforest or the peninsula theme, rainforest theme in the current building. So it should be really nice. And then we began to review and update the policy positions in the strategic plan, updating that for the 2020-2025 year. And we got halfway through the 20 policy statements that night, mostly related to just, in 2019, the board was saying the policy positions were all really dependent on what to do if Proposition 1 passes. And since it has, then we get to look forward to how to go about implementing the long-range plan and expanding services as discussed as part of Prop 1. So, and one point that did kind of rise up in that discussion was we'd really like to get Pierce Transit back on board as a funding partner for that inter-county route, because they don't currently provide those services. Since about 2011, they made a budget decision, and they're looking at doing their own version of Prop 1 down the line, so there's room for conversation there.
Thank you. Any questions for Councilmember Rollins? Councilmember Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. Just one thing, but before I do that, your report outs from the weekend have really warmed my heart, like the ability of Olympians to rise above the national fray and find commonality in really hard conversations, whether mountain bikes or our houseless community. It's really exciting, and so I just want to congratulate everybody involved, especially the citizens that are having those conversations. So my one report is on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. I missed that meeting this past week. Gary Franks from our staff, our solid waste director, attended, gave me a great write-up on the meeting. I would say the first trimester of Solid Waste Advisory Committee with the county has been frustrating, to say the least. We've experienced as a committee a lack of information, and a lack of ability to answer our questions, a lack of staff reporting, to the point where the committee was excited about the agenda this week because the solid waste plan was on the agenda, and we were going to get an update on what had been nearly 6 months old of Department of Ecology comments on the draft plan that had been submitted last year to the Department of Ecology, and where it was going and what the final draft might look like. The committee was informed at the meeting that the plan was submitted to Ecology after a complete major rewrite the Friday before, without the committee seeing it. I'm also under a strong impression that the county commission is moving forward with an RFP for 20 to 30 years to operate the Waste and Recovery Center at Hogan Bay without input from the Solid Waste Advisory Committee. And so I just wanted to let you know that that's where we stand, and if you have an opportunity to speak with your county commissioners, please let them know that that committee is valuable, and that the cities and the port and even our solid waste partners across the county want to see a collaborative conversation happening at the SWAC table, and what's happening right now is anything but. So hopeful that we can get there, but just wanted to make sure you all knew the real situation.
Yes, Councilmember Jones.
A question, Councilmember Cooper. Can you help us with both the genesis and the authority of SWAC, of the Solid Waste Advisory Committee?
Their charter.
Yeah, so it is, and I'll send you some written materials to back this up, but it's essentially chartered in the county code through requirements of actually, I believe, under GMA that create this, but I'm not 100% about that. SWAC is advisory to the Board of County Commissions. The county also has the mandate to write the solid waste plan, as do any of the municipalities that have their own solid waste district, if you will, so our utility. So our option is to write our own solid waste plan as the City of Olympia or partner with the county. And we've had 5-year interlocal agreements to do that plan, all of which amongst all 3 cities in the county, all of which expired last summer.
Okay, so sounds like we are going to need to be maybe writing a letter. Is that something?
Well, I'm trying to figure out where we are in the timeline. We may actually. We got the final draft today of what was submitted. I'll forward it to you so you can look at it. I know our staff are looking at it. We may need to make comment to the Department of Ecology because we weren't able to make comment to the county, and there is a time period that will open up from that.
So it'd be interesting for me to understand whether this is a process issue that they just didn't follow the regular process, or maybe their plan isn't as offensive, or is it a bad plan? Do we even know?
Well, it may not be offensive, but the fact that it was dramatically changed and updated from the first version should have warranted a conversation and a briefing to the advisory committee.
Potentially.
It looks like from the staff bullets about the changes that several of the concerns that our staff and I had were accommodated for, but I haven't read the case in verse to see what that really looks like yet.
Okay. So look forward to getting more information, and I'm sure we'll get that. All right. Thank you. City Manager's report.
Thank you, Mayor Selby. 2 items for tonight. First is, with your permission, I'd like to I'll write up a referral, if you're okay, to General Government Committee. I'd like to take another look at the process and criteria for Heritage Commission recommendations. Tonight you received a really good batch of recommendations, but in responding to questions, we don't have a very clear process or criteria, so I'd like to formalize the work. They're doing new things every year, which is good, but I think it'd be helpful in the predictability. So I will write that up, if you're okay, for your consideration at a future meeting, to refer this to the General Government Committee to look at before next year's nominations.
Sounds good to me.
Great, thank you. The second is good news on top of good news. So you'll recall that last year the City Council authorized a 20-year contract with Puget Sound Energy to provide renewable power. It's a program called Green Direct. And so the City Council agreed to invest in a new wind farm in Lewis County that by the year 2020 will make 100% of the electricity that we use in the City of Olympia from renewable energy. So as part of that 20-year agreement that you authorized, we locked in some fixed power rates for 20 years, which is lower than we would generally pay over a 20-year period. That's the good news. The second part of that is the wind farm will be completed next year. And the additional good news is that Puget Sound Energy has been working with the State Utility Transportation Commission, and actually our rates will be even lower than you approved. So I went ahead and signed an amendment that gives us an additional 11% reduction in those 20 years worth of power rates from 100% renewable energy, which will start in 2020. So good news on top of good news on top of good news. So that's my report.
We'd like to end with that. Any questions for our City Manager? All right. With no further business before the Olympia City Council, we're adjourned.